Hi, everyone. Welcome to the June 25th, 2026 Asheville Urban Forestry Commission special meeting. My name is Karen McNeil, and I have been serving as the interim chair. Our mission is to protect and enhance the urban forest of the city of Asheville through education, collaboration, and policy initiatives that align with the city's Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan and provide for environmental equity and climate resilience. This meeting will be live streamed on the City of Asheville's YouTube channel, and public comment will be heard at the end of the meeting. Thank you all for being here. Now our urban forester, Keith Eichen, will do roll call.
Fantastic. We're going to go through roll call right now. Once I call your name, if you can just say some greetings or hello, that would be great. Thank you. First up, Commissioner McNeil.
Hello.
Commissioner Macy.
Here.
Commissioner Hoyle.
Here.
Commissioner Dietrich. Absent. Commissioner DiFiore.
Here.
Commissioner Chavez.
Here.
Commissioner Fisher.
Here.
Commissioner Van Hook. And Commissioner Hardy, who is absent, not sick today. Okay, just want to acknowledge some of our staff today. We have Assistant City Attorney Carly Gillingham,
Good afternoon.
and Design Director Steph Monson-Dahl,
Hello, everyone.
Blame Technician Aspen Johnson. Thumbs up. Yep. Okay, cool. I'm Keith Aiken, Urban Forester. Also in staff, we have,
In the nick of time.
Sorry, I found
Yep.
the gate to the.
Commissioner Deester, if you can just give us a hello for roll call.
Hello.
All right, we have a quorum and we can begin.
Okay, the first item on our agenda is the approval of the October 7th, 2025 meeting minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll second.
Excellent. Now I believe you do a roll call vote.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do roll call, and please make sure when you do your yay or nay that you speak directly into the mic and that your mic is not on mute. That means the little green button is on, you can see the green button or the green dot. Commissioner McNeil,
Yay.
Commissioner Macy,
I was not present at that meeting, so I abstain. You can't do that.
no.
I can approve minutes of a meeting that I did attend.
Did you
Well, then
have a
I approve.
chance to review the meeting minutes?
I did review the minutes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Then you can participate in the vote.
all right, I approve.
Commissioner Hoyle,
Aye.
Commissioner Dietrich,
Aye.
Commissioner DiFiore,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Can I abstain? I wasn't at the meeting. I wasn't on the commission yet.
I'm sorry.
I wasn't on the commission at that time.
Do you have a chance to review?
No, I
the
didn't review
minutes?
them.
Okay, so basically the only reason for abstaining from voting is if you have a conflict of interest, because you are still voting as a body to approve those minutes.
Okay.
Would you like to take a moment to review them?
Sure, you can come
So-
back to me.
Commissioner Fisher,
Agree, yes.
Commissioner
Go back to-
and that is it.
So we'll just go back to get the full vote from Dawn.
Okay.
Oh, I did review them. I'm sorry. Yes, I approve or yay.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Motion carries.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is new business. The first item is election of chair and vice chair. Do we have any nominations from the commission for chair?
And if I may, Chair, I would just suggest the following procedure for this. You can, as a group, just kind of informally make nominations, and if someone is nominated, then they can be asked if they accept that nomination. Once all the nominations are done, then the board can entertain a motion to formally elect somebody.
Okay, thank you.
I nominate Karen to be chair.
Thank you. Any other nominations?
Can I second that?
Do you accept the
I
nomination?
do accept the nomination, yes.
Are there any other nominations for chair?
Okay, we'll go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Somebody has to make a motion.
Oh, I thought they did.
No, they were just doing the informal nomination. So
Okay.
if somebody could make a formal motion to elect Karen as chair.
I'll make a formal motion to elect Karen as chair.
And I second that.
All right, now we'll go into roll call. Commissioner Macy,
Aye.
Commissioner McNeil,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyle,
Aye.
Commissioner Dietrich,
Aye.
Commissioner DeFiore,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Motion passes.
You can move on to nominations for vice chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any nominations from the commission for vice chair? I would like to nominate Ed Macy.
Second.
Can I make
What
a
was
motion?
the nomination?
Ed Macy.
Okay. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Go ahead, Madam Chair.
I'd like to make a motion to elect Ed Macy as vice chair. Do we have a second?
And I second that motion.
All right, a roll call vote. Commissioner McNeil,
Yes.
Commissioner Macy,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyle,
Aye.
Commissioner Dietrich,
Aye.
Commissioner DeFiore,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Yes.
I want to just take a moment to recognize Zoe for her leadership as chair prior to now, for the last 2.5 years, something like that. But Zoe's done a great job, and I really appreciate your support for urban forestry efforts in the city of Asheville. So thank you very much.
And thank you. And I would like to appreciate Karen McNeil for taking over when I had to step aside.
Yeah, well, thank you, and I agree. Thank you very much, Zoe. You did a wonderful job. Item number 2 under new business is voting on our rules of procedure. Do we have a motion to approve the Urban Forestry Commission rules of procedure?
I will move that we accept the rules of procedure as we read, because we were all supposed to read them.
I second.
Do we have any discussion on this? Okay.
We'll go ahead and take a roll call vote. Commissioner McNeil,
Yes.
Commissioner Macy,
Yes.
Commissioner Hoyle,
Aye.
Commissioner Dietrich,
Aye.
Commissioner DeFiore,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher, and Commissioner Van Hook, who just joined us.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. And item number 3 under new business is fee in lieu policy with Steph Munson-Dahl, our Planning and Urban Design Director, and Carly Gillingham, our Assistant City Attorney.
Good afternoon, Urban Forestry Commission. It's wonderful to see everybody again here in this room in person. So most of this presentation today, you're going to hear from Carly Gillingham, and she's going to talk to you and give you the meat, a real conversation and discussion around the tree fee in lieu policy development. My stuff is really just the introduction and the framing of how we're going to do this. So this is very exciting. I know everybody's been talking about this for quite a long time. So what is this project? We are calling you back together to consider accepting a project to create an administrative policy with staff that will enable the budgeting and spending of the city's tree canopy fee in lieu funds, for which you are aware there's about $500,000 sitting in that pot, more at this point. So now's the time, as we are working on the Urban Forestry Master Plan, to decide the specifics of how those monies can be spent. You'll hear more from Carly about how that is guided. But one thing we wanted to share with you is that the city does have a policy on creating policies. And so this policy is really an administrative policy, but it's a policy nonetheless. So this operating procedure, that if you want to click on it and get the detailed information, I think it will be helpful. I know that there's a subset of you all that have already gone over this and looked at this with some of us on staff, but it can and walk you through step by step. It'll explain exactly like that we have to include stakeholders, what the process is for us to do that research and analysis and take it through our own city review. And then we can, this is just the minimum, and then we can add and finesse the things that need to happen to make sure that it's done correctly, it's done more transparently, and we're open to comments on that as well. When we worked with a subcommittee of the Urban Forestry Commission in spring earlier this year, we agreed on the following goals or outcomes of this process that we're about to embark on, and they are this right now. We want to harness the expertise of the city's Urban Forestry Commission and other forestry and policy experts in the development of an administrative tree fee in lieu policy. So it's high levels of engagement with you all and with other experts. We also want to utilize the city's recovery board structure, and in particular, the people and the Environment Recovery Board, that you do have a member that sits on that board, and they did meet this week. We want to use that structure to also help publicly process this and remind our public that we do have commissions right now during this recovery time that are also helping us encourage engagement and make recommendations to council along with the recommendations that you all will be making. As far as time frame goes, we want to start work in July, and we want to end before or basically at the same time that council is going to be considering the full Urban Forestry Master Plan. It'll be good timing for us to bring this kind of policy level item as a first step to really give some teeth behind, like, this is a plan to be implemented. It's not a plan to sit on a shelf. And lastly, and I'll expound on this here at the bottom, that, really we want a clear understanding and agreement about how the city will use the city's budget process on an annual basis to recommend, probably the steady state spends through budget adoption, which if you've been paying attention, and I know you all have, you know that the city just did adopt a budget, happens on an annual cycle. The city manager's budget is presented each spring, and we'll get more into this, how that might work and how you can be flexible with that over time with Carly's discussion. But to sum that up, upon completion, the community is going to have a clear understanding of how the city's decisions for collecting and spending the tree canopy fee in lieu funds will be made, as well as consistent access to the current funded amounts for each resource management district category, and that's going to happen through the city's website. The policy, as I mentioned, is intended to be high level, so the flexible pieces are coming. So how we're organizing this, and this is our internal organization, we just wanted to know, for you guys to know, we do have a list of people for the city that it's sanctioned that we're working on this, and this is how we frame it up. So as the department director during this time, I will act as the lead project sponsor. And then Carly Gillingham is the project lead overall, and making sure that everything is done according to the goals that we and that we follow our timeline. So we have some other internal subject matter experts with policy, environment, and those are Keith is the urban forester, and project manager for the Urban Forestry Master Plan, Kira Boulon, who is our interim director of sustainability and staff liaison for people in the Environment Recovery Board. So that's our primary team. And when we took a look at, like, we have to let the city manager's office know, how does this align with city council's goals? We think that it aligns, like, that you could say primary, like that this is infrastructure and environment, but this is one of those goals that really crosses a lot of those different thematic areas that council cares about. But we are using the infrastructure and the environment and the people part as the primary part when we report our as far as alignment. Urban Forestry Master Plan obviously is our supporting projects, and because this is going, while this is related to recovery, we just wanted to note that this is more than just a recovery project. This is a long-lasting project whose goals and the uses of this policy may change over time. So just a high-level working group timeline. Here we are. We're at June 25th with the Urban Forestry Commission task assignment. We're going to be asking you today for input on the framework pieces, which I just gave you, the best practices, and example cities. So we're going to let Carly go through all of this first. I put the People and Environment Recovery Board on there just because while it wasn't necessarily in the main content of the meeting, as you'll see as we talk about who's involved in this, they are really an important and key player when it comes to what this working group will look like. So we are suggesting that a functioning working group for this project, and according to our policy on how to create policies, is that the stakeholders would include 4 Urban Forestry Commission members. I believe you've all already discussed through the chair, coordinated conversation, who's going to be participating. We'll have 2 members from People and the Environment Recovery Board, and those people will be our general community members, home residents. They could live anywhere within the city of Asheville. They really have a neighborhood-focused lens. And then two development community members, and that is to address the user group. So fee in lieu is paid for by people who apply to do development projects. And then we have our 4 support staff who just support the team. How this will work out from the timeline is that we'll start incorporating and reviewing your input into our research tasks right away. We know that we'll have at least 2 special meetings with that fee in lieu working group. As we start putting together a draft, we're going to want input on that. And while we can do some of that asynchronously and by email for transparency purposes and also probably for efficiency purposes, it's really smart to get together. And then in the early to late fall, that is when we're wrapping this up, and we would have a recommendation to the People and Environment Board, and then we will go to City Council and ask them for input, and that will probably be through a council committee. Our city manager will determine whether or not the full City Council wants to see that and provide input on it, like at a PFI meeting, which is Policy, Finance, and Infrastructure, for example. And then council will basically provide their input to the city manager on whether or not this should be an administrative policy adoption. And to be clear, it's for administrative policies, we do not have council, it's not usual that we would have council approval. We would have council input, it's an operating policy, and the city manager then uses her judgment on whether or not to adopt the policy. Any questions, general questions? You're seeing heads shaking, great.
Carly Gillingham, Assistant City Attorney. I'm recovering from a sickness, so bear with me if my voice is not all the way there yet. But I'm going to provide a little bit of background about tree fee in lieu and the overall framework of the policy that we're looking at. And then I'm going to go through a few example cities that we've been looking at to try to get ideas about what to put in the policy. And all of this is what we would really love your input on. So Section 719.5 of the Code of Ordinances provides that for development activities covered under the Tree Canopy Preservation Ordinance, developers can opt to pay a fee, which is calculated under the current budget year fees and charges manual in lieu of compliance with the tree canopy requirements.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Sorry to interrupt, but I scoured the manual that you just referenced, and I could not find the fee and lieu schedule for the canopy amendment.
Okay.
Is it in there? I mean,
Do you guys have a specific citation to the fees and charges manual, or maybe we can get that to you after? Yeah, I'm not sure like the citation to the section off the top of my head. So.
is that something that can, the fee schedule get forward to the commission? Is that possible? I'm
Let's
just
see what, we'll
curious.
see what we can do while you all are working on this.
Okay.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you for the question. And good point. If it's not easy to find, it should be easy to find. So payments in lieu of compliance received in relation to properties within a given resource management overlay district have to be used to acquire land and to plant or preserve trees within that same resource management overlay district. And we have 3 of those districts: downtown, urban, and suburban. Currently, the ordinance is the only guidance that the city actually has for spending fees collected. That is acquiring land and planting or preserving trees within the same resource management district. So the goal of this policy is to provide more detail, albeit at a high level with individual yearly budgets determining where money goes specifically, but to provide more detail about how we are spending this money. So this is this is where I'm going to go over the framework of the policy. So first, the policy will go over the overarching city tree preservation and planting goals, which there will be more in the policy, but that can be summed up as follows. The city recognizes that not every tree can or should be retained. When planting and preservation at a site is not feasible or practicable, fee and lieu collection is intended to fund mitigation efforts to replace the lost functions of removed trees. Like Stephanie said, this policy is intended to be high level with individual annual work plans, requests for proposals, standard operating procedures, contracts and agreements, and other individual city actions dictating funding at a more specific level. So first, the policy, or next to the policy, we'll go over collection and use of fees. How are fees collected? Again, with reference to the fees and charges manual, and likely kind of providing a direct citation to that. Fees have to be used to acquire land and to plant or preserve trees. The city may work with third parties to spend funds, provided the party agrees to use funds for a qualifying project under the ordinance. So we are going to put into this policy exactly how it's going to work if we enter into a contract with a third party and give them fee and lieu funds. We are very restricted under our ordinance as to how fee and lieu funds are to be spent. So we have to be really careful that anyone that we contract with is doing a very specific project that qualifies. And then it'll also go over transparency in collecting and managing the funds. Next, it will go over land acquisition. That's one of the things that we can spend tree fee and lieu funds on. So it'll go over when we acquire land for value, that is fair market value, or when appropriate, less than fair market value. For example, if an organization or individual wants to grant the property for this purpose because they want it to be conserved and they want it to be used for planting and preserving trees. It'll go over how we handle land acquisitions both in-house and using contractors. So in-house is going to be, for example, the legal department handling closings and surveys and title work, recording fees. Or it might also include using contractors for things like environmental assessments and appraisals. It'll go over how we assess suitability of land for tree planting and preservation. It'll go over when it is appropriate to make land acquired publicly accessible. It'll go over when we can use conservation easements or possibly other deed restrictions to ensure the land is used for this purpose. And it'll go over how we handle Helene damaged land. Next, it'll go over tree planting, another item that we can use these funds for. It will provide direction on selecting native species. It'll provide direction on how we assess site-specific suitability for a specific species. How do different departments work together? For example, with Public Works or our Helene recovery teams, and how do we work with the community? Next, it will address preservation, which is the final kind of prong that we can spend these funds on. Preservation of existing forested land, of individual trees. What counts towards preservation? How do we ensure that trees that we plant or that we are preserving remain healthy and long-lasting? Protecting the stem, the critical root zone, and providing buffers without overhead or underground infrastructure. And it will also address heritage trees, which is another item that is kind of entering into council discussions and is appropriate as a use for tree fee and lieu funds, provided that all the circumstances align and it is an appropriate use. But this will probably be something like a tree listed on the North Carolina Big Trees list or the American Forest Association's Champion Tree list, or an otherwise qualifying historic resource tree. That is a high-level kind of description of that, though. This is where I will go over some other cities that we've been looking at, both in North Carolina and beyond. There's a lot of links here, and this is where I would really love input from those who are willing to provide it. Go visit these links and see what we've found, and tell us kind of what you like, what you don't like, what you would like to see if Asheville could emulate. But I will go over a few highlights from these studies. So Charlotte has a very similar ordinance. The payments are collected in lieu of protecting trees for certain development situations, and the money has to go for similar uses, planting and preservation. Some highlights of what they do is they often use conservation easements in partnership with land trusts. They do often utilize community partnerships, and they strive to acquire property near public parks or to otherwise make acquired property publicly accessible. Raleigh has a similar scheme. I will say that they had a little bit less detail about those kind of highlights, but very similar scheme of tree planting and land acquisition to preserve trees. It did seem to me a little bit restrictive in that city council actually has the responsibility for setting out specific eligible activities. They also have open space zones. That's a big focus of theirs, and again, is publicly accessible open space. I also included a link to their tree manual. Outside of North Carolina, Knoxville has a tree mitigation bank, which is kind of similar to tree fee and lieu. The urban forester is responsible for determining what trees can be planted using money from that bank on public grounds or right away. Paid in the mitigation bank are exclusively used for planting and maintaining trees on public grounds and rights of way. So that's a little bit unique. Pittsburgh was a very interesting case study. It's very climate-based and resiliency-based, very much a data-based approach called Planting with Purpose, and there's a link there to that. They use something called a tree impact zone prioritization tool, which is designed to help identify where new tree planting would be best. They also use tree potential analysis, which is, again, to estimate where new trees would be beneficial and are possible to be planted. Finally, Louisville, they have a metro tree ordinance with specific standards about tree maintenance, and it's actually the responsibility for abutting private property owners or public property owners if they happen to be public. They also have something called the Equitable Forest Initiative. It's a multifaceted approach to equitable urban canopy and encouraging holistic sustainability for underserved communities, including planting, management, community outreach, and workforce development. I believe those are all the kind of case studies that we found, but we would ask those of you to do research and see if you have ideas from other places as well. So that is the overview of the tree fee and lieu policy and the task assignment. So that's where we're at right now. And yeah, are there any questions? I look forward to hearing feedback from you first of all, but any questions today?
I have a question more about implementation of the fee and lieu policy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes me a moment to decide if I want to ask a question, and this kind of goes back to something that Stephanie was saying, that, did you say that the city manager decides whether or not to implement the fee and lieu policy?
It is an administrative policy, so per policy, the city manager decides to sign the policy, yes.
Okay. So it's not a matter of how to implement the policy, it's whether or not it's a yes, no on the policy. Because say they don't like how the policy is written, would it come back to us for
Yes.
reframing? Okay.
Oh, yeah. If there's a problem, so if what I assume the city manager would do is she's probably going to consult with city council, and if there's a foreseeable issue, like they want more emphasis on something or they don't want it to operate in a certain way, they will give her feedback and she will ask this group to reflect on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions, comments?
I don't know if this is a question or a comment, but I was very interested. I'd gone through these materials before the meeting, and I read in Louisville, and I think also that, is it Urban Canopy Works? They had highlighted that in Boston, a high priority of what they had put together was an equity going to underserved communities or underrepresented, where trees aren't as present, let's call it that. And I was curious if that will be part of the discussion in designing and implementing the going forward policy for the fee and lieu or the Urban Forestry Master Plan itself. Will that come up? I mean, it was not mentioned specifically in any way in what you just said and what I had read earlier. And this comes also back to the basis for the value of the fee and lieu amount. I was able to find documentation of what the fee and lieu amount is, but I couldn't find anything that said what it's based on.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, certainly targeting areas that have fewer trees in a given resource management area would be a focus of the policy, and that is great feedback for us to take into account going forward. Because again, this was just a very high-level introduction because we are starting to work on developing the policy. So yeah, thank you for that feedback. I can't say for sure about the Urban Forestry Master Plan because I haven't been focused on that. But I think staff would be happy to take.
yeah, it seemed like
that
that
into
is
account.
something that fee and lieu would reasonably and easily mesh with from the standpoint of, if you've got a pot of money. I think that it was, how much was it, $500,000, whatever is the value sitting there now, that as you dispense those monies, what are the policy and criteria for where that money goes and the kind of tree establishment, if not only replacement, that's occurring with it, and what are the limitations on where that can occur within the city, or guidance that's a priority-based system. Sounds like what Louisville has and certainly what Boston has.
Yeah. Boston, did you say?
Well, in the listing, I was looking for the materials, it would be in here. There was the document that lists off
okay.
cities that.
One of the, maybe this Equitable Forest Initiative link.
Well, it was in the, is it Urban Canopy? Who's the contractor who's doing the?
Oh, I see. So you're talking about the Urban Forestry Master Plan.
Right,
update,
right, but that.
which you'll learn more about today too.
Right, but that would be, this could be something whether it comes from the master plan or
Gotcha.
comes, which direction it flows, don't know in concept, would be something that would be easily brought together, that as you're administering the fee in lieu, here is a way that you might think about where some of that money goes.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying. Okay.
We do have Mindy Mormon here with Urban Canopy Works, if you want to address that. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, hi, I'm Mindy Mormon with Urban Canopy Works. We've worked with multiple cities on urban forest master plans, and one of the things that we review during this process is typically a fee in lieu. We are working with Louisville right now. We wrote their urban forest master plan. It was completed in 2024, and we're working with them now on this equitable forest initiative. That's actually a grant that they received to work in underserved areas. So it's not really related to the fee in lieu, but we are working with them and we're writing their management plan for those areas. I think to your point, you're asking, maybe I understand this wrong, but if the fee in lieu can be used for implementation of an approved master plan?
Well, it's asking whether those kinds of concepts, what I see written here for Louisville, and you're right, I may have discussed this with you already in the workshop.
Yeah.
It was back in March. But whether those kinds of concepts, which would be perhaps first stated in the master plan, could be brought over into the administration of the fee in lieu policy.
Sure, and I couldn't speak like to the city and how they're set up, but some cities have made that, we have made that recommendation to them in the master plan that they might want to consider using fee in lieu funds to implement the master plan. That is something that we have recommended. Whether or not they move forward with that is up to them and their legal structure. I will say, just to give another example, since I have the microphone, Washington, D.C. has a great model where they use their fee in lieu funds to go to a nonprofit that the city set up. City commissioners are on the board of that nonprofit, and the nonprofit takes those fee in lieu funds, and they're able to plant trees on private property, which often the city is unable to do, just for legal reasons. So the money goes to this nonprofit, and they're able to plant trees on private property, which is often where the money is better spent, because public property is well-funded sometimes. But since the trees are being removed on private property through development, the idea is that they should be replaced on private property. Just an example of another way a fee in lieu is used.
Mm-hmm. Yes, is that
Yeah.
really the idea is that that would become a policy principle that's going to be present in fee in lieu?
Sure,
And
sure.
where and how that would be brought into fee in lieu? Where are you going to put the trees? Do you prioritize tree deficient areas, for example?
Yeah, I love Pittsburgh's example because they're not choosing things randomly. They're using a tool that tells them this is where we get the most benefits. Just my opinion. I think that's defensible, you know?
Thank you. Do we have comments from who is next?
Yeah, mine is a more general overarching question. That's, will the committee have the opportunity to review and tweak this framework before they move forward? Because there's several things in there that we could discuss probably in greater detail, but we don't have time for that today.
That'll be more for the working group.
Well, that's my question. Will the
So-
working group tweak have an opportunity to?
Certainly.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly one of the reasons that we convene you today, is to get your feedback on the framework and to give your ideas. So yeah, thank you.
By framework, do you mean the ordinance?
The policy framework, I think
Policy
that's what he
framework,
means.
just-
So kind of like this outline that we went through of
Yeah.
what the policy is going to address and how.
Right.
Because this is all very high level, and we are seeking your feedback on it. So.
I think what I'm wondering is a lot of the implementation of all this is the details are really important. So right now we're looking at the overview. And so it seems like we have an opportunity right now to give feedback on the overview, but I think it's equally, if not more important, that we have an opportunity, or the working group does, to give a feedback at multiple points on the details of developing this framework. So I think that's what I'm curious about. Will the working group have future opportunities to give feedback on the details?
I don't see why not. It's up to Steph, as planning director, to kind of convene you all for a special meeting for that specific purpose. when we get to that point. But yeah, that's good feedback for now.
Did you finish your thought?
No.
Okay.
I was just responding. I have two thoughts, comments, maybe questions. With regard to the ordinance itself, there's a provision that says the fee and lieu funds need to be used in the same management zone as they were collected. And I'm just interested to see how that unfolds as we develop the policy, because there's very little planting space in downtown, but there's been a lot of tree loss. And then also, another thing I'm interested to see is how the city will interact with other entities that are landholders, like the housing authority or the public schools in this. So just something to keep in mind as we move forward.
Thank you.
Well, I have a couple specific questions, but we don't need to go into it. I'd be curious if we could get a commitment from staff to say that we would be convened for a special meeting before the policy's implemented, just so if people are not in the working group, we have an opportunity to ask specific questions.
So you're saying at least have one more UFC meeting before the policy? Absolutely. I'll commit to that.
Thanks.
Excellent, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
And, this is obviously not the only time that you can provide feedback. I invite you all to look through the links and the slides and provide feedback. Thank you.
All right, if there's no more questions, I think we can move on to the next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's item number 4 under new business, which is the Urban Forest Master Plan Canopy Assessments with Mindy Mormon from Urban Canopy Works, Jackson Marks from Asheville City and Urban Planner, and Andrew Carroll from SkyTech.
One moment. So SkyTech, Andy did a great analysis. Have y'all read the SkyTech analysis report?
Can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Jackson Marks. I'm an urban planner with the city. I'm also the emergency address coordinator, so I work a lot in GIS. So I did a bit of a staff analysis on how SkyTech did. I could go into the 2025 assessment, but I'm going to jump straight into just this quick presentation. This is what SkyTech showed up with. It provided staff. I mean, I do apologize. I flew into Atlanta at midnight last night. I am a little sleep deprived. But they came up to a canopy analysis where about 47% of the city is covered in tree canopy. That's the green and the pink. You can see spots scattered throughout the city. That is the loss that they reported from 2022 to 2025. I'm going to go straight to figure 7A, which is North Asheville. It was a residential area of loss. This was a direct result of Hurricane Helene. Those black dots there, they were done following Hurricane Helene. The Development Service Department, building inspectors, they went out the weekend after and a week following that doing damage assessment of residential structures in the area. About 120 structures in the Beaver Dam area reported some kind of wind or tree damage. You can see a lot of those dots concentrating around where canopy loss was there. That big rectangle one there is a residential development. That's the only exception there. A lot of tree canopy in these residential areas that had a lot of building damage correlate a lot with the wind damage. Staff's analysis of this is those damage assessment wasn't available to SkyTech. That's an internal city resource. It's very confident from staff that SkyTech's imagery analysis correlates with data that staff has. Data that staff doesn't have, however, is exact losses. So following Hurricane Helene, the state legislator and the governor, the Emergency Response Act waived Western North Carolina's tree canopy enforcement actions, removing that barrier or red tape, allowing people to remove damaged or injured trees or trees that risk their safety. Typically, we would have steep slope tree canopy removal permits documenting exact loss. So there is some uncertainty among staff on exactly what percentage of in that pink is true Helene-related loss. I'm going to take a, this is in the SkyTech report as well, they talk a lot about how there is some differences between the NAPE, the agriculture from the National Agricultural Imagery, as well as the Airbus. I reached out to Mark Foster, urban forester, so that is 161 South Charlotte Street and Stevens Lee Center. That pink is a lot of loss. The only confirmed trees that were removed in between that time period following Helene were about 8 or 10 trees. There's a lot of pink that doesn't add up. It is mostly the fact that I believe that the NAPE data is agriculture-based. A lot of the saying I come up with, the largest shrub looks a lot like the smallest tree. So there's a lot of kudzu, there's a lot of other underbrush that was miscategorized in 2022. So that miscategorization was corrected in 2025. Possibly that correction was due to the implementation of new Geo AI that is better at detecting those differences. And so, although it comes off as loss, it's really correct categorization, which should have never been categorized as trees, but it was. Yeah. I'm going a little bit fast, it feels like. Any questions at this initial time? Yes.
So going back to the 2022 data, that can't be corrected because it's just what imagery was available at the time, right?
Yeah, it's the imagery that is available. The agriculture department is a free resource that we use, cities all over use. A lot of it is trained for agricultural purposes and some forestry canopy. Asheville is unique, well, not too unique in its mountainous area. A lot of it is actually shadows. So that area, Stevens Lee is on a hill. A lot of the shadows cast on the kudzu there makes it appear more larger trees, like that there's a large tree canopy casting a shadow down when it's actually the shadow of the hill itself.
So
With that, sorry.
I got a little technical there, sorry.
Sorry. You can go ahead. I'll ask.
yeah, so there's no ability to classify the raw data that comes with NAPE imagery?
It is one of those ones where we need to do, this is one of the reasons why we hired SkyTech, is imagery analysis isn't typically what staff does. We do a lot of polygon analysis, imagery points, data creation. Well, imagery analysis takes the imagery and then programs formulas and refines it using, as staff gets more comfortable with it, I think we'll have better quality analysis in the future where we can trim it a little bit more.
So the answer is yes?
Yes. Yeah.
Is the 2018 data, is that comparable to the 2022?
I did not look at the 2018
Okay.
in this.
I'm thinking too about the, when was it, 2008?
Which was also NAPE imagery.
So comparing 2008 to 2018, using the same imagery, we could pretty.
I will say that the imagery has changed. Camera quality has gotten a lot better, where the millimeter quality is getting smaller and smaller, so the pixel quality is getting better. The light band differences are getting better. The technology is advancing, so the imagery will get more advanced, as well as on the analysis side, rather than writing formulas comparing light, red, green, bandwidth, we're using Geo AI, which is trained on tree canopy analysis. So it's using large language models that's using imagery from across the country to confirm whether or not it's canopy.
Okay, I was just wondering about the 10-year period between 2008 and 2018, and if we could say that, according to that the losses were somewhat accurate.
I haven't had a chance to look at that, but there is an assumption that can be made. Yeah. Jumping in, this is a bit of a gain and positives that I did find in the 2025 report. On the left, Sweeten Creek Road, that's Hendersonville Road, Sweeten Creek, and the railroad that runs next to it. This has been there's a lot of residential development that's happened there. You can see where the tree canopy preservation ordinance has created these longer sections of where preservation is, as well as a lot of light green, which is new canopy that's grown in. A lot of that is required landscaping that once development's finished and the trees are planted in, those are starting to grow and expand. As well as West Asheville, Brevard Road runs down that right column there. This is a residential area where the lots have been subdivided as small as they can really get, and there's single family lots on almost every lot. Canopy's gonna grow. This is a great environment for trees to grow. So there's a great infill happening where trees that were on the property border or planted are thriving. So we actually had a lot of canopy gain in some areas, while some areas had some canopy loss.
Can you explain what we're looking at?
Yes, so I meant to elaborate this, and so I color coded a lot of these. So the dark green is unaffected canopy. This is canopy that has been consistent from 2022 to 2025. The pink was loss, and the light green was gains. Yeah. Yes, I meant to go over that. Thank you for catching that. Yeah, so again, there's a lot of canopy preservation that happened. New infill development came in throughout this part of Sweeten Creek, and through our tree canopy preservation ordinance, good sections have been preserved. New sections are coming in as required landscaping that will remain in perpetuity grows.
But just to be clear, some of that light green could just be shrubs and small plants just growing in naturally,
Uh,
like not intentional plantings.
At the end of the SkyTech report, there was a confidence scaling. So for the 2025, they gave 95% confidence on tree canopy, and I should have read the paper with me and I walked up. For reference, it was somewhere in the high 80s on low shrubs. So the confidence scale on tree canopy was relatively high. Getting above 95 is really hard, and State Kite Peru, I believe it was 94 on there.
So this is with 95% confidence that the light green are new trees.
Yes. And this is another technical challenge that staff has noted that, so there's Airbus and then there's NAPES imagery as well. It is hard to get the imagery to line up. The cameras are in different positions, the sun's in different positions. Asheville is not flat. So this is parking lot trees. Trees do not lose that much canopy, gain that much canopy. It's only 5 and 10 feet on either side. But getting those imagery light, it takes a good amount of staff and research to get those to be exact. So if a future canopy analysis does, we'll do a lot more to fix what I call like shadow wobbling. The shadows are always in different angles depending on the time of day where the photo is, and that can skew where the tree is.
Could that be what was happening in the previous slide?
That could be, yeah. For this one in particular, the shadow that probably was cast from Stevens Lee, the hill where Stevens Lee's on down there, created a larger canopy perception from 2022 that the 2025 couldn't. You raised your hand, I thought. Oh, sorry.
That just seems like with the Brevard Road one, which, I'm familiar with, it just seems like a lot of tree gain and from on the ground visuals, it doesn't seem like.
I agree. I mean, it's pretty easy to drive around that neighborhood and double check that, but I would agree.
Treatment can help answer some of these questions, with the shadow wobbling and stuff. I can't help but being skeptic about what I'm seeing in West Asheville Brevard Road.
Speak into the mic a little bit so we can hear you.
I
Thank you.
apologize, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
Sky could talk more about how they aligned up, especially the 2022 and 25 imagery. There's some good trees that are large and consistent shapes that they were able to canopy overlay correct. But as you get more fine-tuned and closer to the ground, it becomes a little bit more challenging on getting all perfect.
And this is probably a very uninformed question, but when you're talking about tree gain areas and you're talking about plantings that were maybe made in 2022, what kind of tree height are you looking at?
So, I'm forgetting the name of the development there on Sweeten Creek Road. That one was finished in 2019, so a lot of those trees were planted in 2018, and so they were too small to be recorded in 2022. They would have been too young. Now that their canopy has a few years of sun and rain has grown them out, and they're more detected. There's some newer developments. I know I looked at like the district on Fairview Road. That's a relatively new one. They have some on, I forget the name of the North Street there, that the analysis was correct. Those are hedges, and then there are trees. The trees are the size of the hedge right now, so it was the smallest tree. Looks a lot like a hedge sometimes from the sky.
So are you counting those as canopy?
The SkyTech report was purely based off the imagery. If staff were to do a future one, there would be some manual changes that I believe could go in. That would be about 5-10 square feet of additional canopy added. repeating that across a larger scale will add up. It's one of those ones where future canopy assessments, I think having more staff involvement in could improve the quality of what we get. We already have a great one. 2025 SkyTech report is probably the most accurate we have of Asheville. It can get even more though, I think. So there is that figure from the report that talked about 535 acres of net area change that was lost. Looking at the floodplain damage that was done, looking at what we had there, I talked with our floodplain supervisor, about 200 acres of that net loss that was in that pink along the Swananoa River, the French Broad River, as well as the many creeks and streams there, is in that 100-year floodplain or directly affected by Helene. 150, I looked at about 200 development permits in the city. That's where I got there. We had development permits that we were able to track that data, as well as about 9% have confirmed these were trees that had to be cut down from Helene. That 31%, that is what the unaccounted for loss data. That can be from the shadow wobbling, people cutting down trees after Helene, or storm-related tree removal that we didn't get permits for, so we could not be confident in how they removed it. Got a lot of data on the screen. I'm going to pause for people to look. I did think about that. I should have broken out the flood loss a little bit more to elaborate how much along the Swananoa River and the French Broad. I'm planning on doing an amendment to this presentation, adding a slide after sometime late next week, so that additional breakdown, because it is a lot of flood loss. That is kind of a maximalist approach to the flood loss, as bank realignment is done along those creeks as well as along those streams as well.
One thing I was trying to find in the document is what is when calculating the canopy percentage, how do you define the total area of Asheville? What is included in that number? And is that consistent across studies?
Yeah, that was so the SkyTech one,
I'm thinking is particularly about was the French Broad River included in the total area across all the studies and other waterways and other areas that would, are not canopy areas?
Add or subtract the water basin? This is Andy from SkyTech. I'm familiar. Can you?
Carroll, SkyTech. We use the GIS layer for the city of Asheville from the GIS website. Just pulled that in, so it's the GIS definitive boundary that was used in all the area calculations. And then going back to your question on the tree and the resolution, so all the products we delivered were 1 meter resolution. Satellite imagery, we got at 30 centimeter. The USDA imagery was 60 centimeter. We resampled everything to 1 meter to be consistent at a higher resolution. So if a tree is planted and it doesn't fill up a 3 foot by 3 foot square in a pixel, then we're going to miss it. So at a certain point, it has to be a certain height or width, area before we can pick it up as canopy. So there is a little bit of confusion between low vegetation, shrub, and then when it jumps, but we did try to specify, did have the lower accuracy. I think it was like 80% range for the shrub, but it was actually closer to 92% for the canopy, just with our training data. We didn't go out and do field sampling across the city.
Can you speak a little bit closer to the mic? Thanks.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
That's still,
the river is included in the city boundaries, so be included in the not canopy area. Although some tree canopy does overlap into the river boundary waters as well as trees lean.
pair across the different years of the study? Did in 2022, did they also use the same denominator?
That is something I wish I could include. I was thinking about that as something that could have been included in these slides. I will reach out with an answer after I look closer at the river analysis.
Thank you.
questions or comments? For this, is this the entirety of the presentation for this section of the agenda?
Indeed. I had one question. I hope it's not too technical. Did you do this canopy analysis based on photo interpretation?
So photo interpretation as in,
The data
so the,
of 1 meter resolution ape imagery?
that was done through Skytech. So they identified and created the polygon layers that identified this is where canopy starts and where it ends. And so they had the 2022, this is where the canopy is. They had the 2025, clipping out the changes, saying this is what was gained, what was lost, and then comparing those areas is what I mostly looked at.
I just pulled up a Forest Service research article that looked at this approach and is suggesting that it may result in overestimation of canopy in most uses. So I've got the publication I could forward to you.
I had a question. This one might be a little bit technical. I know with the most recent study, seems like there's my understanding is there's two main data sets being used, right? So there's the 2022 baseline imagery, and then there's the high resolution orthomosaic imagery. Sounds like one of those, the high resolution orthomosaic imagery, was ortho-rectified to correct for topography in the area. And I don't know a ton about this, but I know that things change drastically when we introduce steep slopes, as far as like imagery analysis, as far as like just doing anything when it comes to fires. So I was wondering if you all could speak a little bit to how this study, I guess to the how this study accounted for the mountains and what sort of error we should be aware of that.
Thank you. So the satellite imagery that was acquired last year, so it was Airbus and then another vendor, Maxar. Both of those products are ortho-rectified against the terrain model. And then the USDA NAEP 2022, that's always ortho-rectified. So in theory, we're accounting for all of that terrain relief using those products.
Have you all done other similar work in other mountainous terrain? And can you speak to like what, the error looks like nowadays with that technology?
Yeah, I don't recall the error for those particular products right off the top of my head, but I mean, typically it's 3 to 4x the resolution of the pixel. So that would be 3 times. The imagery came in at 30 centimeters, so we're at like 1.2 meter X, Y, Z potentially. So under 3 feet. But yeah, it's definitely not survey grade, but mapping grade data, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question based on the canopy reports that I was reading through prior to the meeting, and it is a lot of information, so bear with me as I try to ask this question. But on Skytech's report, page 17, section 3.2, the canopy change analysis, it states that within the Asheville city limits, canopy coverage declined from 49.51% in 2022 to 47% in 2025. And then in the discussion section, it points to storm-driven disturbance as a contributing factor, but it also goes on to say that a substantial portion of the detected canopy loss may be attributable to urban development activity rather than storm damage, and that canopy loss is concentrated in an area consistent with commercial and residential development activity rather than storm impact, and that it's important to make this distinction for recovery planning, as development-related loss reflects ongoing land use pressure that will continue to erode canopy cover independent of storm events. And then I was also reading Dudek's study, and I'm quoting here too. In 2022, Dudek conducted a new canopy assessment. This analysis estimated that tree canopy covered 54.3% of the city compared to 2018. This reflects an increase of a 9.8 percentage point gain or a 22% relative increase. I was not feeling really confident in how I was getting an understanding of those numbers. So I'm wondering if somebody can explain if DUDEC provided the data that they used to arrive at their findings for this canopy increase. Did they provide their data?
Used was for 2022 with the NAPE imagery. For 2018, they used Davies' study, the study that was previously done. So in their report, they concluded that the methodologies were too different and those numbers couldn't be compared.
Okay, I feel like they, well, I know that they still state in their report that it reflects an increase in canopy, and that while they're not comparable, that their numbers could be used as a baseline. But I feel like I'm not comfortable using those numbers as a baseline. I'm not comfortable with their accuracy. I feel like we can observe in Asheville that there's not been that significant of a canopy increase. And based on the recommendation to include the DUDEC plan in the Urban Forest Master Plan, I would just like to say that I'm not in favor of that.
I agree. I don't think those studies, the comparison of those studies should not be used as a baseline. You could use the 22 study as a baseline using the same methodology, comparing 2022 to future years, but now you have the SkyTech study that does that for you, and they're using the same methodology. So what we're going to do for the Urban Forest Master Plan is use that SkyTech study.
Good.
Yeah.
That one makes a lot more sense to
Yeah,
me.
because DUDEC states that you can't compare their study to Davies' study, but then I think it is vague or confusing to say that that's a baseline, because their study can be a baseline for another study in the future using their methodology, but the canopy change numbers are not the baseline you could use because those studies aren't comparable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I have one. I'm formulating it while I'm talking.
I'm sorry, Ed. I have one more follow-up to a partial question that Karen asked earlier about determining development change as well as tree canopy loss change. Is especially, we've done a pretty good job with our permit records documenting development canopy loss and landscaping change, especially since we've adopted our tree canopy preservation plan. When I pulled all the Acela permits, which is our permit tracking system, I was able to find almost all of our level 1, 2, and 3. These are our larger projects that take out multiple acres. Most residential development now is on less than an acre parcel. Adding those adds up, but larger development. This the SkyTech one looked at Acton Hill, which is one of our larger multi-phase commercial developments we had. That was a large section of it, but so it is, staff has a way of tracking current canopy loss due to development as well. The tree loss during Helene is a lot more spotted, smaller, and that's where that blur and undetermined and uncounted falls into, whether it's miscategorization or loss from wind damage comes in. Yes, Ed.
Yeah, this discussion is starting to make me think that while canopy is a really good measure in terms of baselining and goal setting and things, since you're always forced to compare apples and oranges because the technology and data collection and classification methodology changes over time, and we're measuring canopy over time, unless we have a very consistent way to do that, it's pretty useless in terms of goal setting. And I think that we need to turn our attention towards what Louisville calls purpose. And that's focusing on what ecosystem services are needed most in what areas of the city, and maybe just using an anecdotal approach to establishing that, because this canopy data is, to me, almost useless. You know, for example, you can't use the iTree model with this canopy data because it's like a moving target. So you can't really talk about stormwater management or heat island or the withdrawal of pollutants and carbon sequestration if you have numbers that are all over the board and you can't compare your progress.
I will say that the image resolutions, that is relatively consistent. The quality is getting better is in particular. When the DUDAC report was done, they did that almost all internally through ArcGIS formulas and equation math inside the system. It was a very high technical that staff didn't have time to invest in. Since then, Esri has created a GeoAI that SkyTech used for this. That's becoming more and more accessible. I think staff will have a lot more time to look into these resources and have a much more baseline look at consistent data modules that we can use for these kind of baseline setting.
Something I want to highlight for us too is the distribution of the canopy and how in the reports we could see some areas had 75% tree canopy cover and others had 7. And I think that we need to look at it, and they broke it down into like a block analysis, block level analysis. And, you know, Asheville could have 50%, 60% canopy, but if some places have none and other places are really forested, there's an equity issue. The other thing I had a question about is how the I-26 project is affecting our canopy.
That is something I looked at as well as we have where the plan roads are going, where the construction's going. That is a future presentation that I believe we'll make as the plans become much more concrete. Well, the plans are concrete. There may be some final amendments as they get closer to the ground. They did the groundbreaking with the laying pavement, but that is something I believe we will present in the future on, is where I-26, there was a section on I-40, that new intersection that went in off onto Smoky Park Highway there. That was included in our development canopy loss as well, because they had to clear trees to add that new off-ramp.
Is that near Hillcrest? Or, no?
Um,
Oh, yeah, down there. Okay, by McDonald's. Yeah, I was just looking at Hillcrest, and just how that neighborhood has already been so impacted by the highway, and now it's just cutting up right against people's homes, so.
There would be, I think, a better communication also like 5 years after I-26 is finished, because they will be planting new green barrier buffers, along where the I-26 is going in West and North Asheville, seeing where in 5 years after where new planting canopy would be as well, and seeing post and
Pre and post.
yeah, pre and post, yes.
Thank you.
More comments or questions? Thank you. So that concludes our agenda for today. I'm going to call a 7-minute recess before we go into the work session, if that works for everybody. Okay?
That's fine, yeah, we're really ahead schedule, so.
Yeah, I
yep,
figured
yep.
we could go ahead and keep
Yep.
moving.
That's fine, that works for me.
Okay,
Not bad.
7-minute recess.
Take 10 minutes.
Hand motion. Alrighty, hi everyone, we are back from our recess, and I was made aware that we could ask to do public comment before this work session, so, but we need to take a vote first. So do we have a motion to change the agenda and do public comment before the work session?
I motion we change the agenda and have public comment.
Second.
Do you need to do roll call for this vote, or do we just raise our hands?
And do roll call. Commissioner McNeil,
Yes.
Commissioner Macy,
Aye.
Commissioner Hoyle,
Aye.
Commissioner Dietrich,
Aye.
Commissioner DeFiore,
Aye.
Commissioner Chavez,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Van Hook.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Do you have anyone signed up for public comment?
We do have with four individuals signed up for public comment. When I call your name, if you want to come up to the podium, I believe the mic is already unmuted. Please speak directly into the mic and you'll have 3 minutes. We will alert you when you get to 1 minute. Want to do time? First up to speak is Sharon Sumrall.
Hi, everybody. Sharon Sumrall, former member of UFC and Coalition Asheville Neighborhoods. I'm here to remind everybody, I was part of 719, put it together with other people in this room, and the Assistant City Attorney at the time, to remind everybody that the UFC was in charge of implementing fee in lieu. They were in charge of helping the urban forester and set up the urban forest master plan. And that was always the goal. And that was always how it was supposed to be. The UFC first, working on policy, and then everything came together within the working group within the UFC. So COVID happened, and then Helene after that. But what happened was with the restructuring of the boards and commissions, that the council and city staff decided, in my estimation, a horrible decision to change how the boards and commissions were structured. And it effectively hamstrung the Urban Forestry Commission, which had important decisions to make, and a smart body of people that knew how to deal with this information, and they have diluted it so that you guys have to, in my estimation, this is my opinion, beg to have a meeting. And that shouldn't have to be that way. You should be able to have a meeting once a month, give your expertise, work down within the working groups, how it was originally set up. We worked 2 years on making 719 work, hard years. And they, staff and city council, needs to pay attention to the order it was done because it worked. And what they're doing is they're convoluting it, and they're making decisions that aren't the best for the city and the community, and it's cut down transparency. I am still reviewing CZs in my position of the Coalition of Asheville Neighborhoods.
1 minute left.
And I want to let you know that there are more canopy coming out than what's going in. And I review these CZs, and I can guarantee you that there's more coming out than what's going in. And all we have to do is drive around. I live on Bowcatcher Mountain. We don't have a canopy that's said. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a person that drives around. I'm a landscape contractor, and I know what I see. But please, council and staff, we've got to get UFC coming back once a month to do the job they need to do.
Next up is Amy Smith.
My name is Amy Smith. I am a former chair of the Urban Forestry Commission. I'm a professor with Purdue Global, one of the online schools for Purdue. I am on the board of directors for the North Carolina Urban Forest Council and now the Western North Carolina Urban Forest Council as well. I am here to talk about, first of all, boards and commissions and the importance of this group and boards and commissions overall. So city staff, city council, please use the volunteers that are here in our community. We have expertise beyond belief, people who want to help for free, who want to do this work and be a part of it. So please bring back online the Urban Forestry Commission, other boards and commissions. Their work is very important. I also wanted to talk about the fee in lieu program. As Sharon mentioned, we worked a long time on setting that up and have already put in some of the groundwork on a framework for spending the money. So it's great that this is moving forward. I was a little concerned about the limited scope of the people on the working group. For example, I'd be happy to help, but I didn't see where I would fit in the 3 + 2 + 4 kind of equation there. So maybe open that up a bit. You said public meetings. Definitely hope that those are well advertised so people can get out and be a part of that. Lastly, for the inventory, and I didn't get a chance to read the report that was in the agenda today, but as we were talking about GIS and the changing landscape of how that works, one thing that might be beneficial, or would definitely be, but if it's possible, is a street level tree inventory, tree by tree. We could start with street trees that the city owns, get those into a database. That kind of data does not change. That methodology doesn't change. We can take that and use it year after year. The city should have a basic understanding of all of the street trees in our inventory and be able to use tools like iTree to manage that. So that would be one suggestion, is get that on the slate for a full inventory of our city trees.
1 minute.
That was all I had. Thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you. Next up is Tracy Roisman. Oh, nope. Okay. So our last speaker is Amy Kemp.
Kemp, and I'm an ex-member of the Tree Commission a long time ago. I was here when you started putting together the plans for the Urban Master Forest Plan and talk about an urban forester. So all I really wanted to say is to encourage you to continue to push as hard as you can push, meet as often as you can meet, and continue the beautiful work that's already been done. We all know we've been at it a long time. We can't stop. The whole country is looking at Asheville and how Asheville is going to recover from these events, because the rest of the country is going to go through it too. And we need to really focus on the value of trees in our community, the stormwater runoff, the importance of integrating trees into development, the importance of minimizing runoff in development, and making it all work together, because the whole world works together, and we're relying on you guys to make that happen here in Asheville, and to set examples that the rest of us can take to the rest of the country and point back and say, look what they're doing, just like Louisville has done for so many years in Atlanta. So thank you, keep pushing forward, and please engage the community as much as you can.
Okay, that concludes everyone that signed up.
Now I believe we go into our informal work session that will still be live streamed.
Correct, yeah. Everything's going to remain the same. Everyone can stay in the room if they'd like to, but we will be going with Mindy Mormon with Urban Canopy Works for the goals work session.
Everybody. I've got a few slides just to help the discussion, but this is more of a discussion than a presentation. So I'm Mindy Mormon with Urban Canopy Works. We're your consultant that is developing the Urban Forest Master Plan for you. And we've done this process in many different cities, including Knoxville, Louisville, Boston, Charlotte, Tallahassee, among others. So we have a lot of experience with developing these plans and with working with the community to set goals. So I just want to talk a little bit about what goals are, kind of what we need to think about when we're setting goals. We're talking about goals today and not recommendations or actions, so I want to be clear about the difference between those. Goals are broader. they're more aspirational, and the actions that we take to meet those goals will come from kind of the discovery process, data analysis, all those things. So we'll talk about how they're used, canopy goals, because those are very common, and what Asheville's unique goals should be based on everything we've heard from the community. So goals help define the future Asheville is working towards. If you remember from the discovery process, we use kind of a planning cycle, which is establishing what do we have, what do we want, how do we get there, those are actions, and how are we doing. That's kind of how we measure progress along the way. This is a long-term plan. It's a 20-year action plan because your urban forest is a long-term resource. So it takes time to reach those goals. So what we're here to do today is define the thing we're trying to reach. So we can't decide what we need to do if we haven't defined like what the ultimate goal or what the thing is that we're trying to reach. So when we ask how do we get there, those are the actions and strategies. What are we going to do to reach those goals? The goal is the there. So today we decide what's there, like what does the city look like when we've achieved success? What does our urban forest look like when we can say we've really done it? This is what we want our city to look like. So having that goal gives us a way to measure progress and reassess. So setting goals, there's many, many ways you can do this. Tree canopy goals are very common, and I think it's interesting to have this conversation after the conversation we just had about the urban canopy studies that were done, because we kind of understand better the limitations of those studies. But those are very common, having a citywide percentage, the main average, which at Asheville I think is determined now by SkyTech to be 49%. You could do it by land use, by neighborhood, but ultimately nobody stands on the ground and says, oh good, we used to be 48% and now we're 49. That's not something that you can see with your eyes or experience on a human scale. So I think we're kind of moving away from that, although it's an important number to track over time. Achieving equity is something that lots of cities are talking about. Commissioner Fisher, you mentioned Boston, and that was where equity came up quite a bit during their development process. Having access to tree canopy, so if I live in an area of the city, do I have the same ability to get the benefits of trees than someone who lives in a different area of the city? Increasing levels of benefits provided is one of those. Are we capturing more stormwater? Are temperatures being lowered? Is our air quality getting better? Public health is something that we're hearing about a lot, and it's not something that we really have a good way to track so far, but I'm very interested in how that develops in the future. Are public health outcomes getting better as we plant more trees? There was a study in New York City that found that was the case. As they increased their canopy in a certain area, public health outcomes did get better. And that was done, I think, by the American Lung Association. So that was real research. Increasing levels of benefits provided, level of engagement throughout the community. Do people know more about trees? Do people understand that trees are really important for their quality of life? Are they understanding that more and more? You can count numbers of neighborhoods that are engaged, organizations that are engaged, things like that. Is urban forest quality type goals come up a lot. Is species diversity better? We find that out through a tree inventory, which was part of the development of this urban forest master plan that was completed a couple months ago, and they've just recently put together the summary of all those results. So Asheville has all that data in kind of a GIS map located. All those trees are points on a map. They did 15,000 trees, and they'll be able to tell us what's the species diversity of our public trees. What's the condition of our public trees? They look at site suitability. So are we getting better at planting trees that fit in the location they're planted? You know, right tree, right place. We can do tree planting goals. Often those are very arbitrary. We want to plant 10 million trees. Do we need 10 million trees? Are we planting them in the places where we need trees? So I like tree planting goals if there's an actual thing that they're accomplishing, and it's not just a number somebody picked out of air because it sounded good. Walkability is a huge one, walkability and shade. We're seeing a lot of cities focus on that now, where they're kind of mapping, here's our pedestrian areas, here's the most used areas, here's the areas with shade, here's the areas that are not shaded, and they're using that to prioritize planting locations for trees. Charlotte is someone who's doing that. And Charlotte is a great example that I'll bring up a little bit later when I talk about specific cities we've worked with and how they landed on their goals and how their goals might have changed. So that'll come up in a minute. Canopy goals, just doing some math, how to grow tree canopy in Asheville. That's 294 acres to increase by 1 percentage point. But this gets a little fuzzy because sometimes, like many cities, Asheville will annex properties that are near the city limits. The city limits grow, those properties might have lots of trees, those properties might. So that starts to change the percentage that you're looking at. So that can, those canopy goals can be a little bit muddy and difficult to do something with because those numbers tend to change over time. That's very common for cities to adjust their city limits if somebody makes a request to the city to annex their property. That way they have access to city services like sewer and those types of things. So I wanted to use an example from the city of Tallahassee where I worked prior to joining Urban Canopy Works. I was the city forester there. I worked in the long-term planning department. And we did a urban canopy study, and just zooming into this area, it's kind of in the central core. Canopy is very low in that area, 13%. This roughly, these are census blocks, but this roughly correlates to Florida State University's campus, which is a very, very old campus. It's a very well-planned campus. This is how it looks when you walk around. Now, for reference, the average canopy in Tallahassee, Florida is 55%. This is 13. They're planting trees where trees matter. They've had a long time to plan to do that. There's lots of buildings, there's lots of pavement, lots of sidewalks, but that's not the experience you get on the ground. So I just really like this as an example of putting trees where trees matter, and that from the ground walking around, that canopy, overall average canopy percentage, it doesn't mean a whole lot. So setting goals, what other communities are doing. Cincinnati is a city that has 38% canopy. They've decided they want to work to get every neighborhood above 30%. So rather than a whole city average goal, they're saying let's get trees in neighborhoods where trees are needed, where current canopy is low. Boston was an equity first. They wanted a seat at the table. They didn't necessarily have a canopy goal, but these neighborhoods that had been disenfranchised over a long period of time, they wanted people to ask them what they wanted before they started deciding what was best for them. That was what came out of their urban forest master plan. So goal 1 was equity first, talk to us, keep us involved. Tallahassee was really data-based. When they did their tree inventory, they found that while diversity was pretty good, the diversity was highly weighted towards weak-wooded, volunteer trees like water oak, laurel oak, and invasive species. So maybe the canopy level sounds good on paper, but the quality wasn't there. So for them, they wanted to improve species diversity. They wanted to focus on planting storm-resistant trees, which is a study that the University of Florida did, identifying trees that were more wind-resistant. So that was their major goal that came kind of out of doing their tree inventory, what they found out about their public trees through the process of the Urban Forest Master Plan. Columbus, Ohio, has a long-term goal of 40% by 2050. But they're doing that in a short-term way by stopping losses through revising their development code, which is often part of one of these urban forest master plans as part of implementation, is making some code revisions and address inequities. Again, they felt like many people in the city weren't experiencing the benefits of trees, and that's typically in lower income areas. Charlotte is a really interesting study. They decided 50% by 2050. No reason for that, it just sounded good. You know, and catchy goals matter. People know what that is. So I don't want to discount that that doesn't matter. It does matter. But they are revisiting that right now because it wasn't meaning anything to anyone. Their city was planting trees where they could plant trees and they had available space. But was it putting trees where they really needed trees? They've kind of started thinking maybe this isn't working for us. So what they moved towards, and they still have that goal, but what they did with their comprehensive plan, they had an opportunity to update it, and they made this change. They wanted 10-minute neighborhoods. Their goal is to have people be able to walk to vital services within 10 minutes from every neighborhood. They changed that to say tree-shaded 10-minute walks. So now they know specifically where they're going to be planting the trees that are going to increase their canopy. They're going to be planting trees where shade is needed for these 10-minute walk locations. So they really kind of focused on something that meant something to people on the ground, and they're still doing a canopy goal. We worked in Knoxville, and they wanted canopy growth as well, that 40% by 2040. Sounded great. And they're probably going to be able to do that. They have really strong planting programs, but they also wanted to focus on better quality. So planting better species, working with their public infrastructure folks to design better spaces for trees, expanding some right-of-ways where they could, doing road diets, those kinds of things. Seattle wants to reach 30% by 2037. So that gives them a good long period of time. That goal was set in 2013, and want a community engagement. And again, focus on quality. Quality of urban canopy is super important. And Cleveland wants to experience this shift in thinking, where trees are critical community infrastructure. So the same as they want sidewalks, they want bike trails, they want parks, they want all those things that make the quality of life in a city better. They want trees to be considered just as critical as all those things, utilities, all those things. Reversing the trend in canopy loss. Most cities are trending down in canopy loss, especially well-loved cities where development is happening. So that's just some examples from other cities that we've seen through our work. I wanted to share those with you. At this point, we'll open it up for discussion, questions. Hopefully you've had a chance to look over the engagement summary. I know it was pretty long, but that's everything we learned during the engagement process through the development of this plan. And you also have access to your tree canopy studies. And we have a new report from Arbor Pro, who did the inventory, about canopy quality in Asheville. Any initial thoughts?
I'll start with, my first thoughts are still very recovery-minded in this whole planning process. And some of the things that I've heard repeatedly from community members are that we really need to improve our soil volume standards so that we can have better longevity of the trees that are going in the ground in recovery. And I'm just saying that now to see if we can make sure that it's included in the conversation as far as recovery and this plan.
Great. So recovery from storm damage, longevity of trees, those are good goals. The action step is soil volume. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good example of like what we're talking about. When we think soil volume needs to be better, let's think like why, what is that accomplishing? Longevity of trees. So I'm hearing a goal that's more like let's have an urban forest with longer lived, stronger, structurally stronger trees. And that's a canopy quality thing where an action step might be better space, better soils. Good.
Sorry, to clarify, you said the Arbor Pro inventory is here somewhere? I can't find that.
The Arbor Pro inventory is complete. They are working on a summary, which I don't know is in your hands yet.
The final report is in my hands, but we haven't completed the analysis of it yet. I think
It's brand new, yeah.
Yeah, it's brand new. It just came out last week, and so we're getting ready to get that out in the public eye ASAP. So it should be out probably within 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yep.
I like to see the emphasis on quality in these other cities.
Yeah.
It's all sexy and fun to say you're going to plant 1 million trees, but you got to plant them correctly. And I think an emphasis on that and education for the public about what a properly planted tree looks like, as well as getting the city on board to plant trees properly and take care of trees properly is really important. So it's nice to see other cities are focusing on that.
Great.
Looking through the summary of public engagement, I didn't see anything specific to equity issues. And so I'm wondering if there's going to be additional outreach to communities before the end of the master plan.
Our outreach is mostly complete. We did not hear equity come up as much as we sometimes do, although it did come up. But that didn't seem to be a strong focus from the community. We heard a lot about quality. We heard a lot about managing invasives. We heard a lot about education being needed. And we heard things we typically hear related to equity, like maybe programs that help lower income people keep trees or maintain trees, but it did not come up as an enormous focus.
Were there any sessions held at public housing areas in the city?
We held 2 workshops for an advisory group, which is people kind of representing larger organizations. So affordable housing, excuse me, but there's a coalition. Yeah.
Are you talking about the Legacy Neighborhoods Coalition? Or are you talking about the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee?
I think both were
Yeah.
invited as
I'm
part
sorry,
of the advisory
I can't remember
group. Yeah,
offhand which
yeah.
one you worked with, yeah.
Those sound like like groups, and so just to confirm, there was no outreach done in a public housing community, in like a neighborhood?
We worked with the city and did our best to get into communities as much as we could. But I think after the storm, this is just my opinion, people are really busy and they want to focus on what's really important to them. So if this is kind of lower on the plate for people who are struggling to make ends meet, we do our best to get inclusion from everyone, but they choose what to attend.
I think that's a big assumption to make, that people are too busy.
Yeah.
Because that would be the same across the board, not just for people from low-income backgrounds. I'm not faulting the work that was done and the efforts that were made. I'm just saying that the equity wasn't reflected in the engagement. This could be because of the engagement. Like, people who were engaged in giving feedback were not the people who equity matters to. So,
yeah, I think that's a really common problem that we see across the board is we hear from the tree people, and we know that going in, that we're going to hear from the people who this is top on their mind, and we really do our best to hear from everybody, multiple perspectives. We want to hear from the development community. They often don't come to our meetings because they don't want to be the bad guy in the room. So we do our best to reach communities that we don't often hear from, and we worked with the city to do our best to do that here.
I have a question, comment, and this is asking you to opine on something that you may not be comfortable to do. You said that other communities that you have worked with, and you named several, where equity has been a strong consideration. You said it doesn't seem to have been or did not show up in your conversations in Asheville. Why do you think that?
Oh, well, again, you might disagree, but I think after the storm, people are overwhelmed.
So it's just a matter of priority at this point in time.
I think perhaps, and that's my opinion.
And it also becomes then something where I think it's important to understand the broader public policy value of tree matter as a policy concept, and thinking beyond what, they're just focused on trees. Well, there's a lot broader value to society, to the community, than just, we have more trees, and even in some definitions that would include ecosystem service concepts, but looking at particular, maybe I'm overemphasizing this, but I'm concerned about, not just here, but throughout the country. I was concerned in Boston, where I lived for nearly 40 years, of the disparity in canopy and access to environmental quality resources, if you will, in the community. Yep, you have the green leafy neighborhoods, and then you have the neighborhoods where, no, it's not there. And what can be done to address that disparity with a leveling up concept almost before building that in, at least as a priority, before you even start into, we want to get to that aggregate of whatever it would be, a 40% someplace, but thinking of getting everybody to 30, 35% before you even start trying to get to the 40%.
Yeah, I agree. I think equity, even if someone doesn't realize how much the canopy affects their lives, it's so important for public health, and it's so important for quality of life. And if there's a barrier to people not accessing that, then it is our job to make sure that we're prioritizing that.
So, having said that, is there a way to circle back with your stakeholder component to this master plan to ensure that we address these issues? I mean, are we too late in the game, or is there a little bit more that we can do? Is there a piece of homework that we're missing?
We were hoping to connect with and have a focus group with the Legacy Neighborhood Coalition. They said they were working on a lot of other things, so the city's working with them on a lot of things. So we were hoping to do that. We're still very open to it. It's not too late, absolutely not. But if they want to have the time to talk to us, we would be happy to. The other thing that we are doing as part of this process is looking at survey results from surveys that were done post-storm, and incorporating that into our work so that we're not asking people to do this same, tell us about your life questions over and over and over again. So we're using what we can from that, and the initiatives that the legacy groups are involved in. We're using what we're hearing from, well, we're not hearing, what the city's hearing from them, incorporating into our work to try and make sure we hear from them. But they are focused on other things, and trees aren't rising to the top for them right now. And I think it's a timing thing.
And I would like to add one thing to that. We have had our community liaisons reach out to legacy neighborhoods, and pretty much that's what they came back with. It's just it's not a priority for them. They're dealing with other issues within the city that they would like resolved first before they move forward. Steph might be able to comment a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I'll just say that since time has passed, let's rely on the comment you had. While that's all true, we can just go back and reach out. I also want to elevate the discussion to say, I think at this point, one of the things we're really looking at is like if you think that it should be more highly prioritized, then it's one thing for it to ask us to go out back as staff and talk to people, which we can do. Appreciate that. But we really want to hear from you of whether or not it should be in the top 2 priorities or not. Mm-hmm. Because getting down to the meat, what we're talking about is eventually every year you're going to figure out what you're going to focus on, how to use that fee in lieu allotment. You can't use it on everything. You need to be strategic. And so while these things matters, and we know that equity matters, is it the most important thing in the first 5 years? Is it the most important thing in the first year? Those are the types of pieces of feedback we would really love to hear from you today after you're done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give if I could give one example from Louisville before I take your question. We worked a lot in Louisville on equity issues, and one thing we heard from one of their groups is that, and Louisville was very underfunded as far as taking care of their infrastructure. He said, I've been calling the city for 5 years about these potholes on my street, and they're coming out and planting trees. I don't want a tree. I want you to fix the potholes. My tires are getting ruined. It's, because this is what we're hearing from people, is that we have lots of issues here.
I'd just like to call out for a second, I think we're making a lot of assumptions here about folks that are not in the room. And I think that's why, I also want to mention that the purpose of engaging folks from different neighborhoods is not about figuring out what the priorities are. We all know in this room that equity is a priority. What it's about is building the connections and relationships with community so that we're having these conversations ongoing and building this community forest together. And so that's why folks need to be involved. And to counter your point, yes, it would be nice to have conversations with folks in those areas about planting trees not being a priority. What I would bet from my conversations with folks in a lot of these areas is that hazard trees not being able to be removed on properties is a priority. Mm-hmm. But we need to have those conversations together, because I don't want to put words in people's mouths. So it's critical, this master planning process, the most important thing to me is that we're building connections and relationships with people to carry on to the next step of the process. The priorities will continue to evolve beyond this. And that takes time, reaching out to folks, and it takes, so I think, I just want to share that, and I think that we need to figure out how we're going to engage beyond this extremely biased engagement process. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering if carrying on this deeper engagement could be part of the goals and actions of the plan. My experience with the communities is it takes a long time with individuals before there is a trust level. Mm-hmm. And I keep going back to the Heat Island study, which clearly shows some places where trees need to be planted that are in those neighborhoods. I know in Knoxville, which I'm from, and I'm so proud of what they've done, in the engagement process, they went to the churches. They went to the African-American churches and did their time. They went to a lot of different places. And if that kind of outreach and that sort of person-to-person effort could be part of the plan, if it can't be done before, be part of how we go forward, I think it would be very useful.
Yeah, yes, I'm hearing kind of an ongoing engagement goal here. One of the things we do as part of this engagement process is a speaking circuit option. We call it a road show here, where we'll go to you. We're not asking people to go to another meeting. That was very, very popular in Knoxville. The churches asked for city staff to come and talk about the master plan. There was popular radio stations there where we did some advertisements. So they had a lot of opportunity there, and the people were engaged. So I think, continuing to do a speaking circuit type option for people where we can go and talk to them where they're at rather than asking them to come to additional meetings, I think that would be a really good part of implementation. Yeah.
That's a good comment, Zoe, thanks. So what's next with setting goals, and what's our role in helping with that part of the process?
We'd really like you to help kind of define some potential opportunities, some draft goals. Ultimately, we'll take those to the Recovery Board in August, and that will be the People and Environment Recovery Board, and they'll give their blessing on what we'll move forward with.
So will we have, what information will we have to do that with? I mean, besides off the top of our head, our own, what we think needs to happen. You've collected a lot of stakeholder input, and you've got the tree inventory to work with. I mean, do we have access to that data to help with the goal setting? And
Yeah.
is that a work session that we have to discuss it, or?
This is the work session. Yeah, this is the work session for that discussion.
Yeah,
So we're goal setting right now, but
We're talking about what we want to move forward with to bring to the People and Environment Recovery Board.
okay.
Also, as consultants, our job is to take all of this information we've learned and synthesize it and kind of present what we've heard from everyone, including this group. So if I were to just do it right now, I would say there's a lot of concern around equity and continuing to engage the community. There's discussion about better quality, better spaces for trees, better design for trees, so that we have longer lived, more mature shade trees. And I think, shade infrastructure, that maybe fits under both of those goals. Maybe that fits under equity, making sure we have shade where people are walking and those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, targeted application of tree planting is one thing, but, I think better quality is something that we've talked about a lot over the years. And we had a committee that worked on tree planting standards. A lot of work was done on that. Which UDO chapter was that? Who was working with me on that?
7113?
7113. We did probably close to 8 or 9 months worth of work to make sure that what gets put in the ground stays in the ground and flourishes. And that group kind of came to the conclusion that what the city's requiring in terms of canopy requirements and tree planting requirements, building impact trees, all that stuff, is good as long as the trees survive.
Yeah.
And you drive around town and there's a bunch of empty tree pits, and so something's not working right. So a lot of that pre-work has been done. So focus on quality is paramount.
And we have that work. That was part of our data and analysis, like existing conditions, what's been done up to this point. So yeah, and I thought it was really good. And I agree with you, that's a lot of what we've heard is like, maybe we have a code that's all right, but is it getting enforced? Are the trees being planted properly? And maybe not. So I think that's one of the recommendations we move forward with is better enforcement, planning better space for trees, especially in urban
Right.
environments.
And that's the other point I was going to make, is that we're good at developing policy, but there's no programs and practices
Mhm.
behind the policy. The
Yeah.
policy's there, but there's no enforcement. In the canopy amendment, I could, put a program behind that would ensure from the submittal part of the process right through, the certificate of occupancy, there's a program in place to make sure everything happens the way it's supposed to, following best management practices. That kind of stuff, I think, would be a good goal, or at least strategies behind a goal for improving, overall improvement.
Yeah, agreed.
Enforcement. But enforcement's also education. It's not.
Agreed, yeah.
I think another way to engage communities, different communities, is to have a tree service for people who are low income, to somehow come up with that, because I think that would do a lot to engage people who are afraid of their trees and can't afford any kind of tree pruning or tree service.
Yeah, we did hear a lot about post-storm
Yeah.
fear of trees. People, if they had the money, just removing them so they didn't have to worry about it in the future. And I think that's a major issue. It is in many cities that experience the storm damage. We're working in Greenville, where they're saying the same things. So I think that's an education component. Yeah.
I just want to say it feels like we are being asked to come up with goals without really having all the information, like such as the tree inventory analysis, and also as far as the community engagement outreach. I'm still wondering a little bit what happened when I hear about what happened in Trees Knoxville and really the extensive outreach in communities, and how come. What happened in the process that didn't happen here, do you think?
Again, I think it was a timing thing. I think people are overwhelmed after the storm. They have higher priorities.
Was there reach out to our local churches?
Very much, yes.
Yeah.
I know that the city has a lot of experience engaging with all the communities in Asheville, and I know they did a lot of work. It was one of the things we talked about quite a bit at our project team meetings, was ideas to get out there and get.
And I also, I did speak at one church, Central United Methodist, twice. And I reached out to other churches as well. And, but, once again, it's up for them to reach back out and book, road shows, and they didn't follow up with it. But I even did it. I did it on Sunday after the service, both times.
In the engagement process in other cities, is it usually the city that directly engages with the public, or do a lot of the cities rely upon nonprofit organizations to host those?
It's any and all of the above. We've done master plans where there's a partnership between the city and a local nonprofit. We've done where it's just the city. We usually come with our ideas of what's worked in other cities, but part of our scope is that they know the city best and they know how to reach out, so we rely on them to make the contacts and put the opportunities out there. For us, that speaking circuit is a huge part of the engagement process. It's really successful because, again, lots of people just don't want to go to another meeting and will come to you. So sometimes that's really successful. Sometimes people aren't as interested. It just kind of depends.
Weird idea. What community have you worked in that, in your observation, would be most like Asheville? Setting aside for the moment the fact that there was a big storm and a lot of damage. And what I'm trying to establish is there's some way of trying to correct for let's remove the storm. Let's think about other communities that might have similar characteristics to Asheville and their outlook on how to go about an urban forest master plan, and what's going on in those cities. What was the thinking? And if we could, there's no way to do it. We can't establish a counterfactual of, oh, gee, we don't have a storm. What would the outlook be, and what would be the priorities across communities? But I'm just trying to think, what would be a way, however fleeting the idea is, of trying to adjust what would the Asheville priority scheme be if the storm had not been here?
I think engagement is big in this city. I think there's a lot of people interested and a lot of people who could be more interested. So engagement needs to be an ongoing thing.
Are there communities, I mean, Knoxville may be the best example in terms of something that's pretty close by, has similarities. Now, we don't have a university as large as the University of Tennessee and so forth, but nevertheless, it's a city that has comparable characteristics, I would think, to Asheville.
Sure.
And that could be used to say, if Asheville had not had the storm, it might have had an outlook on how to think about this that'd be more like what has gone on in Knoxville.
Know how to answer that.
Yeah, no, it's just a thought. It's just a thought. It's
Yeah.
something to try to frame the thinking in this
Right.
process to, you can't get rid of the storm, but gee, is there some way that we can at least think about what might have been the priority schemes? And the reality is, going forward, we're still working through, trying to, what do we do as a result of this storm? Yep, it's just like, it won't go away. It's just like the monster that always comes back to life. But nevertheless, it's just, I don't know, I'm brainstorming on, is there a way to augment our thinking in this as relates to looking forward for Asheville and not having it be, I mean, another way to do it would be say, well, gee, don't push it to conclusion right now. Wait a few years. But no, we don't want to do that. We want to go ahead and get a good quality master plan, but we'd like to get a master plan that has priorities in it that reflect the broader, longer-term view of the community, as opposed to one that's just still in the aftershock of this massive, awful storm.
If thinking before the storm, conditions before the storm, I think quality is huge as it relates to invasive species here. And I think that's not as much a management issue as it is an education issue. Management comes after people understand that there is an issue, I think, and that's the engagement portion, because so much of it is on private property. So I think that people who own property need to understand what an invasive species is, why is it bad, what should I be doing about it, and then management and control kind of comes after that. So I would say, if we're talking about urban forest quality, invasive species is like the #1 issue here. And saying it again, I think that equity and engagement is going to be a big thing here. Education came up quite a bit in our discovery. And I think that kind of speaks to equity a little bit, because it wasn't so much people knowing how to plant a tree, but more people knowing that trees are a huge benefit to their lives. And if you grow up in a neighborhood where maybe you don't have as many, you don't understand that this could be different, that your neighborhood could look different.
I would potentially not argue, but discuss that loss of community trees might be a higher priority than invasive plants in our community. And I'm glad that you brought up public health, because I feel like part of this plan needs to be prevention of further damage. And one thing that what I think would have helped prevent further damage would have been to call in the urban forest strike teams. And I feel like that should be included in our plan. I think emphasis on prevention of further damage is really important. And also, on the other side of that coin, having enforcement, adequate enforcement, having an actual enforcement plan that has staff, and also education, because as was mentioned, education is also a form of prevention of further damage, and I just feel like those all together are really important parts of what should be included in our goals. And I do agree, just going back to wanting to hear from us as far as how important is equity. I don't know if we can do a raise of hands, but I think we all feel like equity is pretty high on the list. And if we had been asked about that, we would have emphasized that earlier on in this process. So I guess I don't really have a question. That was more of a comment.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on what you're saying too. Like, we hear from the community and we want to hear the community's priorities, but we're also looking at what we see, at what's going on in the city and the policies, the programs and all those things. And we're using what we know and with our experience also to help form these goals. So, we do see when we look at a canopy study that there's big differences in areas of Asheville and in neighborhoods. So that comes out of the data, like this needs to be corrected. It's just good urban forestry. So it's not entirely what we're hearing from the community that's important, and we want to put it together in a document and say, hey, this is what we did and this is what we heard. But we're also going to use data. We're going to use what we see up through our analysis and in the discovery process to put forward goals that we think as urban foresters are going to be what the community should focus on.
I keep going back to Cleveland's thing about treating trees as critical community infrastructure, and
yeah.
I feel like that could be a good baseline goal, and everything kind of stems from that. Whereas, we wouldn't leave a neighborhood without water.
Right.
So the same way, we wouldn't leave a neighborhood without trees, or we wouldn't install, a water line that was too small, just as much as we shouldn't put a plant in a place that it's not going to grow. And also give it a good success with, removal of invasives and other things around it in a responsible way. But yeah, I think that's kind of where my mind is right now as far as a baseline goal, treating it like critical infrastructure. And,
Yeah,
and
I think-
educating people like that, in a way that
Yeah.
ties into all the benefits that trees are if they are a part of the community.
Yeah, I think this is a great place for that type of thinking, especially because it's not just critical infrastructure, but it's like Asheville's identity as a nature-loving place. That's something we heard a lot is like, not necessarily this is our identity, but things that pointed towards that, like, this is why I moved here. This is why my family loves to visit. This is who people think we are when they think of Asheville. It's a major part of Asheville's character and something that the city and the citizens don't want to lose, knowing that a lot of people want to be here and the city's growing. So we heard things that pointed towards that idea quite a bit, and that's an example of like, here's what we hear and here's what we know that kind of means,
Will these goals have performance measures or criteria indicators?
Yes.
And how's it going to be organized in the classic plan way, like community resource and like community goals, resource goals, administrative or is that how you,
The goals and the recommendations that support the goals are always kind of hard because every time we write them, it's like, well, this recommendation kind of helps achieve all the goals. So how we set up the plan kind of comes as we write it. But yes, everything that we recommend would be measurable. Either, yes, we made this code revision, or yes, we put this map together that identified priority areas for shading sidewalks, and now we can measure we've done X number of miles or whatever it is. Canopy goals, obviously.
What time frame? Is it 5 years, 10 years?
Depends on what it is.
Okay.
It might be a code revision. It's like, do it in a year or 2 years, depending on, public involvement. Something like increasing shade, that would be longer term, but you could make a metric that's like, we want to increase shade in walkable areas by 2% every year.
Yeah.
So, and they would all have some kind of measuring, short, long-term, endlessly ongoing. But they would all have kind of their own metric depending on what the goal is or the recommendation. Yeah.
It sounds like we're leaning away from just a canopy percentage goal.
Mhm.
Is that? No?
I am, I mean, personally, because.
You are leaning away, or you're leaning
away from it
toward? Okay.
because, data is reliable enough to rely on.
Okay. I'm just taking the temperature of the room.
Yeah,
Like,
and
is that?
my mind goes like all that resources that goes into those canopy studies, if that was put towards teaching people how to respect trees or like instilling a respect for trees as members of our community, what would the city look like instead of, oh, we achieved 50%, whatever that means,
And I think measuring engagement of communities that we feel like we didn't hear enough from would be a good measurement. Like,
I agree with everything you're all saying in practicality, but I do wonder if having a canopy percentage goal, even though we can't measure it reliably, can act as sort of like a, here in Asheville, we have a really hard time with the ongoing development. And I just wonder if it can act as sort of like a barrier for, like, hey, we want to gain this much canopy or keep this much canopy. It could be a number we point to, like, oh, well, you've destroyed, this much canopy from the development. I don't know. It might be a nice backstop.
I think
I still think they have value. It's just, look at Cincinnati. I think they do have like an ultimate overall canopy goal, but they're achieving it by working to get every neighborhood up to 30%. So
That's exactly what I think we should
yeah.
be doing, like keep that overall goal, but get the neighborhoods with the lowest canopy up to a minimum and then beyond.
I don't know much about, these metrics and everything, but I wonder if there's a way to, instead of doing it with canopy, do it with the heat island effect. Is there a way to measure that on a, because that would kind of come into like the quality of the trees,
Yeah, that should definitely be
the
factored in.
level of
it
shade
seems like.
that's
Yeah.
being applied. Just a question.
On that note, you'd have to like have a baseline measurement. So lots of cities have a heat analysis study.
And we
okay.
do have one,
Oh,
right?
great. Okay.
2018 or something? Is that?
We probably have it too. I'm just forgetting right now
Yeah.
because that would be something we look over as part of our process. But yeah, establish a baseline and then use that to take measurements. Yeah.
I mean, anecdotally, we know whether there's a need for more canopy, especially after Helene, when, if you're cycling or walking or running, along the greenways by the river, there's a lot of lost canopy there. I mean,
Yeah.
and if you're at 2 in the afternoon on a week like this, you really bake. So canopy goals for, places where people recreate, I think are appropriate. No less than 80% if it's a greenway or a park or something, unless it's a ball field, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm not saying, I don't know, I don't love the canopy percentages. They're very superficial.
Yeah.
But I'm just trying to think about, like, do we need something, and is it a possible tool to keep in place? Not so much for like our goals of increasing the urban canopy, which are so much more like based on quality and diversity, but like more so about like something in place that can just prevent
More like
overdevelopment
landscape
of stuff.
scale canopy goals instead of citywide, because that North Asheville is going to be pushing 80-90%, where some neighborhoods downtown and and East Asheville have much less canopy. But if there's like a landscape scale canopy goal, I don't know if anybody's ever done that, but
Oh, yeah, I like the breaking it into smaller blocks for sure. Neighborhoods.
Yeah, neighborhood scale.
Yeah.
Which requires more work, I think, in the short run. Canopy analysis on a neighborhood basis or a census block basis.
That's how we do them on census block, and often we'll include neighborhoods. If there's good neighborhood boundaries, a lot of cities don't have good neighborhood boundaries.
Yeah.
They're decent here, but not perfect. They're never perfect. If you do a neighborhood meeting, most of the argument is the boundaries of the neighborhood. I've lived in Frenchtown for 20 years. You don't live in Frenchtown. So those are hard. But we do always, whatever layers the city has, the UTC consultant will use to do all the study at one time, so it doesn't increase the cost.
Right. And then the other thing is access and proximity. I mean, and that's also an equity issue, but how far are you away from, public space that has forests that you can,
And that easily measurable too.
Yeah.
Did we put trees there?
And what you're doing right now in establishing goals, what is the aerial granularity that you are working with? We just finished talking about neighborhoods. Are you going to be trying to develop goals that will be specific to whether you want to call them neighborhoods or some other unit of area? What is the thinking on that right now?
I think that goals should apply to the whole community, but the recommendations to achieve that goal might be like smaller area specific, like again, Cincinnati's example of working specifically in each neighborhood that's below 30%. So the goal would be for the whole community, but the way to achieve it would get kind of more granular.
Yeah, your slides actually make the point. You have a slide that's called Canopy at the Human Scale, and it's the one that's of Tallahassee, but you've got an excerpt from it that is showing the range of canopy coverage, 13% at one point, 40% at another point. And it seems like that is an important way of thinking about what is going to go on here in Asheville. And again, maybe that it very much can be an equity concept. It can be looking at neighborhoods that have been deprived in some way over time. But it's just, again, to understand what you will be trying to do and whether it's going to be just an aggregate, as you say, then you have tactics of how you get to it, or actually focusing to individual neighborhoods or areas within the overall community, that here are the places where we really want to emphasize enhancing the canopy coverage here, and other places,
they're doing good.
be real. Other places don't need it. It'd be nice if they could continue, but they are already there. And getting to those places that aren't already there is a high priority.
Yeah, I'm hearing that, and we're hearing that a lot lately as people kind of start to realize, planting a bunch of trees in a park that didn't have many in an affluent area, that actually didn't get us what we wanted. What we want is more people benefiting from trees. Yeah. So I don't expect to come out of this meeting with, here's our draft goals. This was more part of our engagement process and part of our discussion to come to you towards the end when we've heard all the things we've heard and kind of get to more of a refined place. So for me, this helped a lot. I appreciate it. I hope you got something out of this conversation, but mostly this was kind of for us to further refine what we're hearing.
Once things are going?
What we present to the People and Environment Recovery Board, we'll go through the normal process of being released to the public. I think what we're planning to do for the People and Environment Recovery Board is put some options in front of them and some draft recommendations, so they kind of understand, here's the difference between a goal and a recommendation. And once we hear from them and get their input and feedback, then we'll move forward with a narrative and recommendations, which is kind of the executive summary, so to speak, of the Urban Forest Master Plan. The story will tell the recommendations that it will contain, and we get approval from that too. It might be from the city. We still haven't discussed that, but we do that so we don't get too far into writing the plan before we make sure we're on the right track with everybody.
Going to say that there's a sense that if perhaps the Urban Forestry Commission had been included more thoroughly earlier on, we could have offered more of these insights in the planning process. And I know we can't go back, and I know that we've been in storm recovery, but I do think that moving forward, that the Urban Forestry Commission should be included as much as possible on the whole, not just, yes, I'm the representative on the People and the Environment Recovery Board, but I think we have a lot of valuable expertise here, obviously, but beyond me, that should be included in the conversation. So hopefully we'll be able to have another meeting with the commission to go over these draft goals.
Yeah, we really appreciated the opportunity to talk to you earlier during the discovery phase, and we appreciate this conversation very much too. So, yeah.
Do you have an answer to Karen? I'd love to hear if there's a plan for us to engage again.
That wouldn't be up to me. That would be up to the city.
Okay. And before we end, I didn't realize we were closing up on the goals. I think there's some important goal that hasn't been talked about. So we've talked about equity. We've talked about tree canopy percentage and tree quality especially. But something on here I think that's come up over and over again in our conversations, but not maybe just explicitly as a goal, is so Boston has community-led, and then Tallahassee has engaged with the community. And we've seen an unfortunate pattern of that step not happening as much as we would all like in this process, but long before that. And so I would like to see a goal built around that value and clear steps outlined on how we plan to carry forward this plan by engaging the community and like all the amazing like knowledge we have in the area and all these amazing nonprofits and organizations, because that's how we're going to really carry this stuff out. And so I would like to see that kind of explicitly called out. Us to like, it's hard. It's really hard to engage with community. And I think we have to start by acknowledging that we haven't done that in Asheville very much. And it's not any like one organization's fault. We have to start by acknowledging that we are behind, a lot of cities are doing it a lot better than Asheville. And then let's figure out how we do it better. And it's going to take time, but we need to intentionally build that into what we're doing from the beginning.
Great, I agree, yeah.
I just want to say that I'm very encouraged by the commission's interest and support of equity. And, you know, given that most of us are not from an under-resourced, disadvantaged background, it's very encouraging to see that. I had a question about the process. So we are beyond this right now. We're not going to be involved in setting the goals.
I'll defer to the city.
Are we going to be involved in setting goals beyond this session?
Do you have an answer for that, or do you want me to say what I think?
Say what you think.
Okay. I would ask you all, how do you want to be involved in the goal setting? Today was set up to try to get as much input from you as possible on the upfront piece of this process. We are going to be working, as you heard, through the People and Environment Recovery Board, which we have representation on. We certainly can collect things from you asynchronously. We certainly, as we bring together people for fee and lieu, can add things, to the agenda. But I think the biggest thing is, how do you want to be involved?
I think upfront as much as possible.
Ongoing participation. I mean, look, this is, again, I'm new at this. A little bit like Dawn. This is the first time I've been present in this process. But it strikes me almost as a little odd that the Environment and Recovery entity is the lead for this, as opposed to the Urban Forester and the Urban Forestry Commission, and that it ought to be present throughout this. This is about the forest in Asheville and what's going to be done over 5, 10, 15, I don't know what the duration is of the goal concept, years. And whereas the recovery, that is something, let's hope that's short term. Let's hope that will not be a priority. I don't know what's going to be the length of time for that not to be the case. But the longer term consideration is what the UFC is about. The shorter term consideration is about what do we do because of the storm.
Yeah.
So I think whatever the frequency is that you're having a discussion on this and presenting something to be reviewed and commented on and input to come back in, that ought to be the participation level that this commission has in that.
Yeah.
I'll share a couple things. So the first thing is, there is a commitment from staff on a monthly basis to provide updates through the chair. So that information, anytime we get a report or there's activities that staff are doing, things that we learn, Keith is on that. And we continue, I think, to use some of the pathways we have and grow some of new ones. That might be a good idea. I think what you bring up about the Urban Forestry Commission's involvement because of the subject matter expertise is really important. And I also want to advocate and remind everyone that the reason we did a very extensive public engagement process is because we wanted to include not only the subject matters expertise, but the voices from other stakeholders. And moving forward, some of those stakeholders, frankly, include, people who want to see more bike lanes in those spaces, and now I'm getting in the nitty gritty. Those spaces compete with trees. They can also go along just wonderfully with them. So the reason why we go to the People and the Environment Recovery Board is to have one is because council did decide that those are the active boards right now that they're hearing recommendations from. Doesn't preclude you from making a recommendation, and we have always assumed that the Urban Forestry Commission was going to make a recommendation to City Council about the adoption of the master plan, including any of the specific elements in it. So there's a possibility that it's a yes and, if that makes sense to you. We haven't even discussed this, but we are very likely to bring this to the Planning and Zoning Commission as well, who's very concerned that, they don't want to just see plans and talk about plans that have to do with development, but they want to talk about the growth and development of our community as a whole, which is what they're also charged with in their ordinance. So you'll have lots of partners to have discussions with. And if you want to talk, like Karen will sit down and talk about strategies to make sure that continued conversation happens, where you can provide more specific input on goals. The next step is really to just start drafting some and then get feedback on them.
I do think that as far as our vision for participation, I think that would include another meeting to go over these goals.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah. And it might be that we would at that time also be looking at some other items. Yes.
And I want to add for vision for participation, and as you know, have been advocating to be more involved in this since I joined this board, and have not been able to join in many conversations that I requested to be part of. And I think, moving forward, while I appreciate having these meetings, this is really valuable. It feels a little bit like a lot of work is done without our involvement, and then we are given a bunch of information that we weren't part of deciding without all the information. It's like we're like jumping in, like skydiving in every once in a while, and then we're like not part of that participation for a long time. And what I would love to see participation look like is a more consistent along the big decision points along the entire way of doing this. And I would like that to be planned out farther ahead of time. The dates, of course, not, but it feels like there's been a lot of uncertainty of like, oh, are we involved? Is there a UFC? Is there not a UFC? Are we going to be able to make a decision on this? And this is just from what I'm feeling from my end, is I don't know if I'll ever be involved again. And then I found out I am, and not knowing, it's confusing, and it doesn't feel like I'm part of it. But then this happens, and I'm like, oh, I'm part of it. Oh wait, am I going to be part of it again? It's really hard to be part of a process like that, where we can't know that. Yeah, it needs to be more consistent to our involvement. And the other point I want to make, more consistent involvement. The second point I want to make is, yes, you all put a lot of work. I can't imagine the work in trying to get people from the community, at churches, at different places to give engagement. But I think there was a step potentially missed in the middle, where I think you all are going directly to the community. And I think that's hard for a lot of communities. Like, I don't know, like a lot of folks are wary of government, like, probably all of us in this room in some ways. And like, I think I would ask that we think about relying more heavily on the community partners that have those relationships that are a little closer tied. Those nonprofits on the list, there's a lot of nonprofits that were not on this list that I think would have been really great to include, that are less directly environment related, maybe have deeper connections with some of the communities we missed. I think about A-Hope as a great example of a community that has lots of connections with the community. That's a whole population that is probably not captured in this. And so I think there's these intermediary organizations that the city maybe could partner a little more closely with and rely on them to get that input from folks. I know that when I tried to get in, or kind of bombed into one of the meetings previously, I was trying to advocate to go to some of those groups. So I think I'm talking in circles now. More consistent involvement, and let's rely on community partners a little more. to do the stakeholder process.
I want to just add on to what Chris was saying as far as actually mentioning circles. It's that I feel like community engagement is not linear. Sharing updates with me so that I can share them with the rest of the commission is very, it's very linear. But what we need to do is complete this circle and be able to get feedback from the community from these updates and then share them back with you all. And I feel like that's happening a little bit here. We've had a chance to share what we've learned from the community, but to just receive updates and to not necessarily have the chance to share the community's thoughts on these updates, that's not really the full circle of community engagement. So I'd like to see more of that. And I do think that having another meeting will help with that. Like prior to this meeting, I reached out to folks and asked, what are your priorities? And in hopes that we could include that discussion in this meeting. And along those same lines, I'd like to get a more detailed explanation on what counts as a quorum outside of this, since we haven't been meeting as regularly as we would like. If we could get an answer from Carly about a quorum of UFC membership and what that means outside of here. Because we have other groups that are interested in Urban Forestry Commission subjects. And it's my understanding that they're allowed to meet together as long as it's on a topic that's not going to be voted on, but I would like to have more clarity on that.
So quorum is 6, right, Keith? 5, sorry. Quorum is 5. So if you're always welcome to meet in groups less than 5. When you are meeting in groups of 5 or more and you're discussing business that pertains to the Urban Forestry Commission's mission, that's considered a public meeting, and it has to be properly noticed. It has to be publicly accessible, open to the public. Minutes have to be taken, and so that's the restriction. It's not voting. It's any
Let me
meeting.
give you a hypothetical example. It's not hypothetical, it's a real example. There's a group, Western North Carolina Urban Forest Council, which, and their purpose is to meet to discuss what's the best way to put it, best management practices, science behind urban forestry issues in other communities around the Asheville area. Their role is not to advocate for the city issues related to urban forestry for the city of Asheville. There's a tree protection task force that does that, but it's more like a let me describe this.
You're more involved with this.
Yeah, because you're more involved. But anyway, it's a group where many of us have interests outside of the city of Asheville, where we get together and talk about urban forestry issues. And we've been limiting ourselves to 3 or 4 members of the commission at the time, but it would be to our advantage if everybody that wanted to be there could be there. Even though it's not city related, it's resource related. Would that be?
You can be there, but when you're having
Answer.
when you're having dialogue, with each other at the same time in groups of 5 or more, that's when you go into open meetings law.
If you specifically,
Dialogue, so we're talking about the World Cup. And
No.
No. No.
Our mission statement.
Our mission's related to the mission statement.
and I also
Related to the business of the Urban Forestry Commission.
yeah, can we get her to?
Go ahead.
Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to recognize that Mindy was still here. And we needed to finish the presentation.
Sorry, sorry. Do we have any more questions about Mindy's presentation?
Yeah, I do. So I hate to put you on the spot, and I apologize. But after listening to all of this, if you were to go and deliver some draft goals to the People and Environmental Recovery Board next, can you kind of summarize what you feel like the 2 or 3 goals you would be presenting to them? Because we've talked a lot about equity, we've talked a lot about improving quality, and maybe a little bit about stop losses, like that goal from Columbus. But what would you kind of summarize and present?
that's a joke, this is on the record, but just off the top of my head, definitely equity, definitely kind of an ongoing plan for engagement as part of an equity goal. I think definitely a quality goal, and that's more based on what we're seeing from data. And I think there's something in structure way of thinking. And I don't know if that would be a goal. In Louisville, that was a recommendation to work trees in as a critical infrastructure. So recommendations to achieve that were like have all your city assets in one database: trees, streetlights, sidewalks, all those things. It was work trees into all your planning documents. So like design manuals for transportation, not just suggesting that trees are important part, but like specific standards. Where are we putting trees? So I think just off the top of my head, difficult thing to do. There would be equity education and quality. 2 goals. I mean, you don't have to have a certain number of goals. I think 2 is too few. I like at least 3. So I would want to think and a little bit more about a 3rd goal, at least 1 more. But yeah, that's what I'm hearing, I think, from this conversation today is equity and education and engagement needs to be like a huge ongoing thing. And having quality trees is important, and it supports that too, but.
Do we have any other questions or comments for Mindy?
I don't know. It's really hard to shift what's a goal and what's a strategy. Like
Struggle.
education is a strategy towards the community valuing their trees.
Right. Yeah.
That's it's changing the way people actually think about trees. Requires education.
Yeah, and I think that's a tough thing to measure, but I think there's a way to figure out how to measure that through the recommendations, just that fundamental shift in thinking.
Anything else from anybody? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we did receive a number of public comments via email that was not mentioned during the public comment section. So just to say that we did receive them, thank you. And hopefully we can address some of those concerns or questions at our future meeting. And do we have anything else left to discuss today?
2 things. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I think 1, I just want to mention a thought on a theme on the public comments, and then 2, I'd like to continue. I feel like I want to get some more clarity on the quorum thing we started discussing. I feel like we almost got there. When we finish, we start with that one.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about it anymore, but if we can get something in writing that kind of succinctly describes what we can and can't do, I think that would be useful.
Okay.
We'll absolutely share the section of the handbook that outlines how that works.
Okay.
Yeah, the handbook.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
And I might also just follow up that during the meeting, we had Aspen put a document in your meeting materials to follow up on a question that the commission members had, Mr. Macy, about the tree fee in lieu, the fees, and also where that was. So it's a section of the UDO and then a section of the fees and charges manual. And then we also included a link to the tree canopy calculator so everyone can see that.
Regarding the public comment, I think there's just a theme in the public comment that comes up I think is worth just bookmarking for exploration for the Urban Forestry Master Plan, and that's the community's concern over the use of chemicals by the city of Roundup. And I don't know I don't know if even the city does that, but I think it could be useful just to like explicitly note what our goals are around chemicals, especially as we're moving forward, so that we're all sort of on the same page, and also so that this, like folks have an understanding of where chemicals are being used and by who and who's not using them so that we can avoid any conflicts.
We'll follow up on that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, my question was also about the quorum issue, and if it's going to be resolved later, I can hold. I was just wondering, like, if the members of the Urban Forestry Commission wanted to have a follow-up meeting, we would just need to announce it publicly that we were having that?
No, you can't announce it publicly yourselves. It has to go through the city because we have to make sure there's legal representation there and that the city clerk's office issues the notices appropriately.
Okay, so in the code that we're going to look at, or the rules around the quorum, that's explained as well?
Right, it'll basically say that you're not allowed to meet with, to discuss, like, to deliberate on an item that you're gonna be voting for and what your quorum is. We'll confirm again that it's 5 and, yeah. So just to be clear for everyone, you absolutely can meet and talk about all manner of things regarding urban forestry, but say that if you were to meet with more than a quorum and be discussing things like recommendations on the fee in lieu, that would not be allowed. That needs to happen in a public meeting because it's something that you're going to be voting on. That's the difference.
Okay, so if we met to talk about the goals, just in general, of like what we thought about the goals that were discussed here, because we're not voting on them, that would be okay to do that?
It's a good, what you just said there, because you're not voting on them, I think that is something we would want to talk to the chair about, because if you guys want to meet and talk about the goals and just do general recommendations through the chair and then provide information to staff, to me, that's input and not deliberation, as long as you're not voting on it later. So we'll talk with the chair about this also gets to the question you said, Wig, how are we involved? What is our role in the process of developing these goals? Let's get down in the nitty gritty, and that should help answer your question.
Thank you.
I just want to correct, I was going back over the couple of comments. It does not say anything about the city using chemicals, but it talks about other organizations.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but yeah. just wanna
Was the
correct that.
public comment all by one person? I saw 3 things. Okay, there was,
There were a couple people that mentioned
oh, a
Roundup.
couple, okay.
Yeah.
I'll look back.
Think about Roundup, I don't think the city can regulate private use of Roundup.
No.
Right, but going back to the urban forestry master plan, I think it's a bigger conversation, right, than the city of what we as a city want to do
Does the
with
city use it, though,
chemicals.
that we know of?
No.
No? That's good to know. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, the comments seem to be directed more towards private use, which, in the context of endangered pollinators.
Yeah, yeah, I guess the purpose is just to flag that. I think it was probably an important conversation for the master plan to just talk about the chemical usage.
All right, well, we are at 3:54, so getting close to 4 o'clock. Do we have any more comments before we adjourn?
I have a quick question. What's the next step on the FIL working group? July 26 is what's specified as membership confirmed, and then there's late summer to early fall 2026 to start producing. What is the next step here?
Meeting poll.
So yeah, the next step is, once we confirm the 2 members, 1 member from the People Environment Board, and then we have 2 other members from the development community. And once we have those names, my goal right now is to reach out on the 29th and send an email out to everyone within the working group, the 4 members here, and then those 4 other members that I talked about. And then we will set our first date, and then we will have a meeting on that date with an agenda.
Expected timeframe, you said then we will meet. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
so we're hoping to wrap this all up in 2 months. So between July and August for this work group to meet. So I would expect the first meeting to be sometime after July 4th, so that we get the holiday out of the way.
And I have a quick request. So when you all send updates to me, because it's usually blind copied, it's hard for me to know who else is included. So can you specify that as far as what I need to forward or what's included everybody?
Yep, yeah, and everyone on this commission is BCC'd on that, so there's
On all the
not.
updates?
Yeah, on all the
Okay.
updates, yeah, all 9 members are included on that. Yep.
Thank you.
Karen, if I could bring up something. There was a alternative compliance case that came through last year, property on the corner of Regent Park and Patton Avenue. There's a very large red oak that they assured us was going to have tree protection zone around it. And they've been doing construction on that lot for the last 6 months with absolutely zero protection for that tree. Vehicles, equipment, material storage, all of it has been right up to the base of the tree. So I wanted to put that out in the public, let you all know, as well as Urban Forester. Hopefully something can be enforced. Please.
Sure, yeah, I'd have to look into that. I'm not familiar with that project, so yeah, we can.
Regent Park and Patton Avenue, I think they're putting a car wash in.
Okay, yep, we can look at it, and
Thanks.
obviously, if they're in violation, we'll deal with it. All right.
Okay, anything else? Is it appropriate to adjourn at this time? Okay. Do we need a motion?